Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping into a narrative that, well, it practically breathes with this ancient, really unsettling energy. I want you to picture this with me. The Grand Portrait Gallery of Castle Blackwood.
Hmm.
The air isn't just thick with, old oil and dust. It feels heavy, charged, almost like the stern faces of those long-dead lords and ladies on the canvases are actually watching you.
Right. Their eyes seem to hold centuries of secrets.
Exactly. It's a setting that doesn't just house a tale, it feels like it is part of the tale itself, sort of humming with this almost malevolent anticipation.
It's true. And what's really fascinating about that kind of introduction is how the narrative immediately establishes this profound sense of ancient history and, yeah, foreboding. This isn't just some decorative backdrop, the cattle, the gallery.
Mhm.
They feel like active participants in the drama that's about to
By
unfold.
active participants, I like that.
They subtly hint at the kind of, well, dark malevolence that seems to have permeated these stones over time. It suggests that whatever secrets are lurking here, they carry this heavy, maybe even cursed legacy.
You instantly get the sense you're entering a world where history isn't just in books, right? It
Mhm.
feels alive, breathing, watchful.
Absolutely. It sets the stage perfectly.
And within this deeply atmospheric setting, our mission today is to really unpack this riveting narrative from the portrait's grin. We're going to take a deep dive into the perilous path of unchecked ambition.
Mm.
We're exploring not just what happens when desire goes completely off the rails, but the profound, heartbreaking cost of that blind pursuit. We'll dissect the tragic consequences of failing to recognize truth, especially when it comes from unexpected places, even when it's, screaming silently right in front of you.
And it often is, isn't it?
It feels like it. This isn't just a story. It's more like a detailed study in these intricate layers of character, plot, and theme, all designed really to illuminate some pretty universal human flaws.
And the source material itself, these excerpts from the portrait's grin, it really is a masterclass in building suspense and weaving in these elements of tragic irony.
Mm.
It demands a close, attentive reading.
You can't just skim it.
No, absolutely not. It allows us to uncover these hidden depths, this emotional resonance that if you overlook it, if you miss those subtle cues, it leads to profound and utterly devastating consequences. It's a narrative that deliberately misleads the characters,
Uh-huh.
which, in a way, mirrors how easily we can mislead ourselves, you know?
That's a great point. So, as we delve into this, what are the core ideas we should be looking out for? I mean, how does this blind ambition inevitably lead to ruin, not just for the individual, for Elias, but for everyone caught in his orbit?
Right, the collateral damage.
Exactly. And what happens when we completely dismiss crucial warnings, especially, and this feels key, when those warnings come from people we've maybe underestimated or even deemed beneath our notice?
Like Thomas.
Precisely. And then there's the chilling question. What is the true nature of this ultimate power Elias is chasing? And what hidden, maybe horrific price does it actually demand?
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this gripping tale and see what chilling insights it really holds for us, and maybe what reflections it sparks about our own lives, our own potential blind spots.
Indeed, it's a journey deep into the human psyche, I think, exploring the dangers of tunnel vision, the insidious nature of self-deception, and the profound tragedy that unfolds when perception is just utterly skewed by overwhelming, unexamined desire. The story uses these fantastical elements, these dark magic elements, but really, it holds up a very real mirror to our own human tendencies.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Let's really immerse ourselves back in that atmosphere of Castle Blackwood.
Yep.
Grand Portrait Gallery. You said it's almost a character itself.
Mm-hmm.
The narrative opens with this incredibly vivid description. Air thick with the scent of old oil and dust, the stern visages of long-dead lords and ladies. You can almost feel that oppressive historical weight of the place.
You really can.
It conjures this sense of ancient secrets, of impending drama, right from the first paragraph, wouldn't you say?
It absolutely does, and those details are so deliberate, so carefully chosen. The atmosphere itself, those ancient smells, the watchful painted eyes that seem to follow you, it immediately sets a tone that's, well, it's far from welcoming, isn't it?
Definitely not welcoming.
It hints at the castle's long and potentially very dark history, suggesting that secrets aren't merely contained within its walls, but they're embedded in the very fabric of the building, actively influencing events. This immediate sense of foreboding subtly foreshadows that whatever unfolds here will be deeply tied to, and perhaps even manipulated by, the castle's hidden past. It's almost like the building itself carries the weight of past malevolence.
Making it the perfect stage.
Exactly. The perfect stage for a character like Elias, driven by similar dark ambitions. The environment becomes this silent observer, and ultimately, you could argue, a participant in the unfolding tragedy.
And within this really charged atmosphere, we meet our central figures, Lord Elias Thorne and his young page, Thomas. Now, Elias is described as a mage of considerable, albeit self-taught, skill.
Right, self-taught, that feels important.
It does, but the narrative is quick, really quick, to expose his flaws right from the start, a characteristic stubbornness and, critically, this perpetual self-absorption. His ambition is just laid bare immediately.
No attempt to hide it.
None. And then, in stark contrast, we have young Thomas. He's a silent, watchful presence. But here's the key part. Often misunderstood. Perceived as simple or slow, he possessed a quiet intensity that Elias rarely noticed. It's striking how early we learn that Thomas is misunderstood. How does this immediately set up a tragic element to their relationship? And what's it saying about perception itself?
Oh, this detail about Thomas is profoundly important. It acts as this powerful seed of tragic irony that just blossoms throughout the entire story. By establishing Thomas right away as misunderstood and perceived as simple or slow, the narrative positions him as a character with hidden depths.
Right.
There's more going on there.
Much more. An innate understanding that goes far beyond what Elias, or maybe most people, would attribute to him. And Elias's perpetual self-absorption, it acts like this impenetrable barrier. It renders him utterly incapable of recognizing Thomas's quiet intelligence, his keen observation, or his sort of intuitive grasp of subtle truths.
He just doesn't see it.
He cannot see it. This initial disconnect isn't just a character dynamic. It's a fundamental flaw in Elias's perception that becomes the very mechanism of his undoing. It really forces us, the readers, to reflect, doesn't it? How often do we miss vital information or dismiss profound truths simply because they come from sources we've underestimated?
Yeah, or because our own ego gets in the way.
Precisely. Because our ego prevents us from truly seeing others for who they are. Thomas's perceived simplicity isn't just a character trait. It's the lens through which Elias's tragic blindness is magnified, setting the stage for all those unheeded warnings and ultimately devastation. And the trigger for Elias's ambition, the thing that really sets him off, is revealed almost immediately. A messenger arrives, breathless and mud-splattered, bringing news. The king is dead. Prince Regulus is ascending the throne.
A moment of national significance.
You'd think. But what's so incredibly telling is Elias's reaction. There's no grief, no concern for the kingdom's stability. Instead, the text says he feels a tremor that promised opportunity.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. His long-standing craving for influence, power, a seat at the table of the powerful, it's instantly ignited, and it's specifically fueled by his perception of the new king. He explicitly sees the weakling king, Regulus, as creating a power vacuum.
His justification.
Exactly. His convenient justification for pursuing his own desires. So the king's death isn't a moment of mourning for Elias. It's like a personal invitation. Come on in, grab some power.
Yeah.
What does this reveal about his moral compass? Or maybe the chilling lack of one?
I think it immediately establishes Elias as a pure opportunist. He's driven by this unyielding ego and a relentless desire for personal gain, rather than any shred of duty, loyalty, or even basic human empathy.
Yeah, empathy seems completely absent.
Completely. His perception of Regulus as a weakling. It isn't some objective assessment of the new king's abilities. It's just a convenient projection of Elias's own intense desire for dominance. He's not thinking, how can I serve the kingdom?
No.
He's thinking, how can I exploit this perceived vulnerability for my own personal gain, to elevate myself above everyone else? It's a classic setup for a tragic fall, isn't it? Ambition completely untethered from wisdom or compassion or any kind of ethical foundation. It almost inevitably leads to ruin.
It seems like a rule in these stories.
His moral compass is entirely self-serving. It points only towards his own elevation, regardless of the cost to others or the kingdom. It's a really stark portrayal of how that thirst for power can just utterly eclipse human connection and responsibility.
And the narrative deepens the psychological portrait almost immediately, showing us Elias's fascination with a specific portrait, King Theron the Cruel.
Ah, yes, Theron.
Theron's painted eyes seemed to gleam with a malicious intelligence, and legend whispered that Theron himself had dabbled in forbidden arts, seeking power not just for his reign but for himself, purely personal gain.
Just like Elias wants.
Exactly. And Elias feels this undeniable kinship with that ambition, recognizing in Theron the insatiable hunger that gnawed within him. It's truly striking. He identifies with a king known specifically for cruelty and forbidden magic, What kind of power is he really after here? It feels like it goes beyond just typical political influence. What are the underlying, maybe darker desires?
This is such a critical psychological insight into Elias. His immediate, profound identification with Theron the Cruel explicitly shows us that Elias isn't seeking power for the good of the kingdom, or even for some, noble, knowledge-driven purpose.
Not at all.
It's purely for personal gratification, for control, for dominance over others. That insatiable hunger isn't for enlightenment or improving society, it's for something darker, something aligned with cruelty and self-serving gain. This isn't just about mastering magical arts anymore.
It feels different.
It feels like it's about a forbidden, almost malevolent power that aligns perfectly with a legacy of tyranny. It poses that profound question for us, doesn't it? Does one truly seek power for a specific purpose, or does a certain kind of destructive power, perhaps one that thrives on human desire, actually seek out the individual who craves it most fiercely, echoing its own dark nature?
That's a chilling thought, like the power itself is looking for a host.
Exactly. The very portrait of Theron seems to beckon Elias, doesn't it? Drawing him towards this dangerous, destructive path that extends far beyond the mundane affairs of court politics. It's a powerful symbol of how that corrupting influence can reach across centuries.
So, as this dark ambition takes root, Elias dives headfirst into obsessive research. The narrative paints this really vivid picture. Days spent poring over ancient texts in the castle library, descriptions of dusty tomes bound in cracked leather, their pages brittle with age.
You can almost smell the dust.
You can, and he's not just scanning, he's translating difficult passages filled with arcane symbols and diagrams. And then there's this chilling, specific detail, a particularly disturbing illustration, a grotesque figure writhing in chains.
Ah, that image.
He's fully immersed. What kind of knowledge is he really seeking here? It feels like it's beyond just magic in a general sense. What does that imagery of the chained figure suggest about the nature of this hidden knowledge?
He's not merely reading, is he? The emphasis on translating difficult passages tells us this knowledge is deliberately obscure, intentionally dangerous. It's guarding its secrets, almost protecting itself from those who are unworthy or, frankly, unprepared to handle it.
Like it doesn't want to be found easily.
Exactly. It's knowledge that was meant to be forgotten, knowledge holding immense power and consequently immense peril. And that imagery, the grotesque figure writhing in chains, it isn't just a disturbing drawing, it's profoundly symbolic.
Oh, so.
It represents the kind of power that comes with terrible cost, doesn't it? A power that perhaps itself desires to be freed, or maybe a power that, when wielded, ensnares the wielder rather than truly empowering them.
So the chains could be on the power or on the person using it?
Or both. It's a potent visual metaphor for suffering, containment, entrapment. It foreshadows the very nature of what Elias is attempting to unleash. He's seeking a power that is clearly imprisoned for a very good reason. A reason his ambition utterly blinds him to. It's like a warning etched onto the page itself, if only he had the eyes to see it.
But he doesn't. And amidst all this intense, dark study, Thomas, his young page, remains this quiet, consistent presence. The narrative notes Thomas bringing Elias his meals, his movements quiet, his eyes occasionally flicking towards the arcane symbols.
He notices things.
He does. Then we get this specific, incredibly telling incident. Thomas reaches out, almost tentatively, as if to touch that disturbing illustration, the one with the figure writhing in chains, and Elias's response. Pure impatience. Careful, boy. This is not for your eyes. Go, fetch more lamp oil.
Just brushes him off.
Completely. Thomas tries to interact, to engage with these texts, maybe even connect on some level, and Elias just dismisses him. Is this just everyday rudeness from a self-absorbed master, or is it something far more significant in the context of this unfolding tragedy and Elias's character arc?
Oh, it's profoundly significant. I mean, you could argue it's one of the most poignant moments of tragic irony in the entire narrative. This is Thomas's first subtle but deeply intuitive attempt at communication, maybe even a premonitory warning. He senses the danger in that illustration, perhaps the suffering it represents.
He feels it?
He feels it. Yet Elias, completely blinded by his own preoccupation, his perpetual self-absorption, and let's face it, his intellectual arrogance, utterly misses it. His dismissive instruction, "This is not for your eyes," is just bitterly ironic.
Because maybe it is for Thomas's eyes, in a way.
Exactly. Because Thomas seems to possess this innate understanding, kind of primal perception, that Elias, despite all his arcane studies and his presumed intellectual superiority, entirely lacks. Elias's inability to see Thomas's potential insight, to value anything from someone he perceives as simple or slow, just amplifies the tragedy exponentially.
It really
It's a
does.
stark reminder of how often we, in the real world, might disregard vital warnings or profound insights because they don't come from the places or the people we expect, or simply because they contradict our preconceived notions. It's a heartbreaking setup for everything that follows.
And Elias's research, fueled by this blindness, eventually leads him to a truly chilling discovery. References to a hidden chamber beneath the oldest part of the castle, a place where King Theron apparently communed with entities not of this sphere to gain unnatural power.
Entities not of this sphere, that phrase alone.
It sends shivers down your spine. The texts describe a ritual tied to blood and shadow, performed specifically during times of significant transition, like the death of a king and the rise of another. This sounds like something straight out of a cosmic nightmare. Entities not of this sphere. What kind of power is Elias actually chasing now? It feels like he's gone way beyond conventional magic, hasn't he?
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it strongly suggests Elias has moved far, far beyond the familiar realm of traditional magic, which, often implies some level of human control or at least understanding. He's delved into something truly alien and deeply dangerous.
Alien is the word.
Entities not of this sphere implies beings from completely outside our conventional reality, touching on a form of cosmic horror that fundamentally transcends human comprehension or, frankly, any ethical boundaries we might have. The description of the ritual tied to blood and shadow, combined with its specific timing during a transition, points to a deliberate exploitation of a momentary vulnerability, a crack in the fabric of reality itself.
Wow.
Elias isn't just seeking to master some arcane art. He's attempting to conjure or bind or perhaps even just unleash a primal, sentient presence that exists entirely outside the natural order. This isn't a quest for power, as we typically understand it. It's a perilous dance with forbidden, unknowable forces. It's like extending an invitation to something that could shatter the very world he knows.
And maybe shatter him in the process.
Or inhabit him, yeah, rather than empower him.
And as if to underline this profound danger, the texts themselves are not subtle. They don't hint, they shout warnings. They are described as unsettling, filled with warnings of madness and corruption, crystal clear.
Explicit warnings.
But Elias, caught in his characteristic stubbornness, interprets these warnings not as dangers, but as tests of will. The narrative explicitly states that his desperate craving for the power that would elevate him, that would make him indispensable, twists his perception. He's actively rationalizing away clear, explicit dangers. What's going on in his head here? What psychological mechanisms are at play? Why is he so utterly unwilling to see the truth, even when it's spelled out?
That raises such a critical question for us all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is it purely stubbornness? Or is it something more insidious, like a profound form of cognitive dissonance? Elias's desire for power, that desperate craving to be indispensable, it's so overwhelmingly powerful that it fundamentally distorts his entire perception of reality.
It bends reality to fit his desire.
Exactly. He actively reinterprets every obstacle, every explicit warning about madness and corruption as merely a challenge to his own will. A trial designed to test his worthiness, rather than seeing them as genuine existential threats to his sanity or his life. It's a classic, tragic example of hubris leading directly to self-deception.
Textbook hubris.
His mind, utterly trapped in its ambition, filters out anything that contradicts his predetermined path. It effectively convinces him that these warnings are just part of the game, mere obstacles meant to prove his mettle. He's become a prisoner of his own ambition, constructing a reality where every sign, no matter how ominous, is twisted to confirm his self-serving narrative. It's a chilling illustration of how easily desire can blind us to the most obvious truths.
And it's not just the text warning him. The castle itself seems to be reacting to Elias's deepening descent into this forbidden knowledge. The story describes this creeping dread that began to infest the castle. It's not just in his head, it's palpable.
Tangible manifestations.
Exactly. Specific details like cold spots that moved like living things, faint, unnatural sounds that echoed in empty corridors, and maybe the most unsettling part, the way the portraits in the gallery seemed to shift their expressions when he wasn't looking. The castle isn't just a backdrop anymore, it's actively giving him physical, visceral warnings. Warnings he continues to just ignore.
And these aren't just spooky details thrown in to create atmosphere, are they?
Yeah.
They feel like critical, tangible manifestations of the entity's growing influence.
Yeah.
Perhaps even its awakening or its increasing awareness of Elias's actions. The castle is described almost as if it's sentient, its very stones permeated by this ancient, malevolent power.
Like the stones are alive with it.
Precisely. The cold spots and unnatural sounds are physical disturbances anyone might notice, but the shifting portraits, that's particularly potent and unsettling, isn't it? It directly echoes the initial description of Theron's portrait, suggesting the entity's influence is directly connected to the castle's history and its painted inhabitants. They're observing, reacting. It's a profound psychological horror element, a constant physical screen from the environment itself that Elias tragically and stubbornly continues to dismiss. He's so focused on his internal quest, his ambition, that he just ignores the external reality screaming at him to stop.
Just as Elias feels he's getting close, just on the cusp of this chilling discovery, a new figure enters the scene. Lord Valerius, the king's chamberlain. Now, Elias immediately pegs him as a rival for influence at court. He describes Valerius as a man of sharp features and sharper wit. And Valerius's voice is depicted as smooth, laced with what Elias perceived as condescension. So enter the supposed rival. What's Elias's immediate read on Valerius here? And how does this deep-seated perception just color their entire interactions, setting up this tragic miscommunication?
Elias immediately projects his own deeply rooted insecurities and his vaulting ambitions onto Valerius. He instantly categorizes him as a rival rather than seeing him as a potential ally or even just a genuinely concerned colleague.
He can't conceive of that possibility.
It seems not. This knee-jerk reaction is such a critical point of dramatic irony, completely setting up the tragic miscommunication that follows. Elias's perception is utterly skewed by his ego and his single-minded pursuit of power. He views everyone through this narrow lens of competition, apparently incapable of imagining any motivation other than a desire to claim what he believes is his discovery, his power.
It's all about him.
His internal narrative of rivalry is so powerful, so rigid, that it completely overrides any objective assessment of Valerius's true intent. It locks him into this dangerous, self-fulfilling prophecy of conflict. He almost needs Valerius to be an adversary, and so that's how he sees him, despite all evidence that starts to mount to the contrary.
And their confrontation in the library really highlights this dynamic, doesn't it? Valerius's initial comment is quite pointed. Still buried in your curiosities, Elias. The new king arrives within the week. There are matters of state requiring attention, not dusty legends, practical concerns.
Added concerns, yeah.
But Elias, predictably, bristles. He retorts, legends often hold truths, Valerius. Truths that men like you, bound by parchment and protocol, would never comprehend. You can just hear the contempt. Elias is clearly defensive, almost sneering. He sees Valerius as this lesser intellect, incapable of understanding the true, deeper knowledge he's pursuing. What does this exchange tell us about these different forms of knowledge and the dangers of that kind of intellectual arrogance?
This exchange perfectly encapsulates Elias's profound intellectual arrogance, doesn't it? He sincerely believes that his arcane knowledge, gleaned from these dusty legends, is inherently superior to Valerius's practical wisdom, superior to his understanding of parchment and protocol, or the, mundane affairs of state.
He thinks Valerius is just a bureaucrat.
Essentially. For Elias, Valerius represents this pedestrian, earthbound intellect, while Elias himself imagines he's soaring into these higher, forbidden realms of knowledge. And this very belief is a significant part of his undoing. He dismisses Valerius's concerns as just the narrow-mindedness of a lesser mind, rather than considering them as potentially legitimate warnings rooted in a different but equally valid form of intelligence or experience.
It's a clash.
It's a clash of different kinds of understanding, the esoteric versus the pragmatic, and Elias's hubris prevents him from valuing anything that falls outside his own highly specialized and ultimately incredibly dangerous pursuits. He's already decided he's superior, making deaf to any real insight Valerius might genuinely offer. It seals his fate, really.
And then Valerius delivers this remarkably direct, really ominous warning. He replies, and some truths are best left undisturbed. The text notes his eyes hold a depth Elias couldn't fathom, and he states explicitly, be careful, Thorn, ambition is a hungry beast.
Wow, that direct?
It's incredibly direct. Ambition is a hungry beast. That's a clear, concise warning carrying this palpable weight of experience, almost like a personal plea. How does Elias interpret that? Does he finally pause? Does he heed it?
What's truly fascinating and just tragically ironic here is how explicit Valerius is being. Despite the absolute clarity of the warning, Elias is utterly incapable of hearing the true message. He's so deeply steeped in his own competitive mindset, so consumed by his self-made narrative of rivalry, that he interprets this genuine warning as nothing more than a cunning tactic, a trick. The depth Elias couldn't fathom in Valerius's eyes. That isn't just descriptive flair. It hints that Valerius possesses a knowledge or an understanding that Elias completely lacks, possibly even specific knowledge about the entity itself, or at least about the true nature of such forbidden powers and their devastating consequences.
Valerius might know more than he's letting on.
It certainly feels that way, and it forces us to ask again, why does Elias remain so stubbornly blind? He's utterly convinced Valerius is merely trying to deter him from his discovery, trying to stop him from gaining power that Valerius maybe wants for himself.
Right, still seeing it as a power grab.
Exactly, rather than seeing it as a desperate attempt to save him from a devastating, world-altering danger. He sees it as a shrewd move in a power game, not a desperate plea from a concerned individual who knows the true stakes. It speaks to this profound confirmation bias within Elias. He sees only what confirms his existing beliefs, dismissing all contradictory evidence out of hand.
So instead of being warned, instead of feeling even a flicker of caution or doubt, Elias's immediate conclusion is yes, Valerius was trying to distract him, to keep him from discovering the true source of power, no doubt intending to claim it for himself.
Unbelievable.
And the result is just devastatingly ironic. This only hardened Elias's resolve. He vows he would find the chamber, claim the power, and rise above Valerius and all the courtly schemers. He's completely missed the point, hasn't he? The warning has only pushed him further down this destructive path.
This is the absolute height of Elias's tragic flaw. His complete inability to perceive an ally or even just a simple well-wisher, and his stubborn, almost pathological refusal to accept anything that contradicts his predetermined path to power. His ambition isn't just a hunger anymore. It's become this impenetrable shield.
Yeah, deflecting everything.
Deflecting all inconvenient truths, all genuine concern, all rational thought. His hardened resolve isn't a sign of strength or admirable determination. It's an inexorable, self-destructive march straight towards his own doom. The irony is excruciating. The very act meant to save him inadvertently seals his fate, propelling him even faster towards the abyss.
Wow.
It's a powerful lesson in how an unyielding personal narrative can literally prevent us from seeing salvation, turning even well-intentioned interventions into fuel for our downfall. Elias's ego, in effect, has become the co-conspirator in his own destruction.
Following those cryptic clues in the texts, Elias finally locates the hidden passage behind a loose stone in the castle's deepest cellar. And true to form, Thomas is with him, carrying a lantern, his small face pale in its flickering light.
Still there.
Still there. He's finally found the way into the forbidden chamber, and Thomas is still beside him, this quiet, almost spectral presence. The symbolism of this descent, both literal and figurative, feels incredibly potent here.
It truly is. The physical descent into the deepest cellar is profoundly symbolic of Elias's psychological and moral descent into a forbidden and deeply dangerous realm. He is literally going to the lowest point, both geographically and morally, that he could possibly reach within that castle.
The bottom in every sense.
In every sense. And the pale light on Thomas's face, described in the flickering lantern, it hints not just at the physical darkness of the cellar, but also at the boy's palpable apprehension, or perhaps a nascent intuitive awareness of the profound and unnatural danger they are approaching. Thomas's constant, silent presence, though seemingly insignificant to Elias, continues to serve as this quiet counterpoint, doesn't it?
Yeah, a reminder.
A persistent reminder of the humanity, the connection to the natural order, that Elias is so recklessly abandoning in his pursuit. He's dragging innocence itself along on his dark quest.
And as they descend the narrow, winding staircase into this passage, the atmosphere grows even more chilling, amplifying that sense of dread we talked about. The air becomes heavy and cold, carrying a faint metallic odor. And then there's this truly unsettling detail. The stones themselves, not just the air, start to glow with a faint phosphorescent glow.
Stones are glowing.
The stones themselves, these descriptions paint such a vivid and deeply unsettling picture. What's happening to the environment as they get closer? What does this sensory shift imply about the nature of the entity and Elias's proximity to it?
The intensification of these sensory details, that heavy, unnatural cold, the faint metallic odor, and especially that unsettling phosphorescent glow coming from the stones themselves, are absolutely crucial. They indicate a radical shift in reality. They signal a proximity to something truly not of this world, something ancient and malevolent that has permeated and corrupted the very structure of the castle over centuries.
It's in the walls.
Literally in the walls. The phosphorescent glow implies that the castle's stones aren't just inert objects. They've been infused or warped by this ancient power. Or perhaps they're even part of its prison or its manifestations. It signifies they're crossing a threshold into a domain where the laws of nature are distorted and the entity's influence is already seeping into the physical world, almost like a living, breathing presence itself. Wow. The environment is becoming more alive with this dangerous alien energy, signaling to anyone sensitive enough that they are entering a place of profound danger. A true unholy ground.
And here's where one of the story's most tragic and revealing moments occurs. It's a real gut punch. Thomas stumbles, dropping the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Elias, ever impatient, ever arrogant, just snaps. Clumsy fool.
Predictable Elias.
Completely. But then the crucial, heartbreaking detail emerges. Thomas didn't respond, but Elias heard a soft, scraping sound. When Elias finally relights the lantern, Thomas is standing utterly still, his hand outstretched, fingers tracing a pattern on the damp stone wall, and this pattern, it's one Elias recognized from the forbidden texts, a binding symbol.
Oh my God.
It's clear. Thomas wasn't clumsy, he was doing something vital. What does this mean for our understanding of Thomas's true nature and just the agonizing depth of Elias's blindness at this point?
This is truly the turning point, isn't it? The agonizing reveal that underscores the full extent of Elias's self-absorption and Thomas's profound, unheeded sacrifice. That scraping sound, it wasn't a clumsy fall. It was a deliberate, desperate act of heroism. Thomas, the misunderstood page, was actively, consciously reinforcing the very binding symbols meant to contain the entity.
He knew what they were.
He knew. He was using his intuitive connection to the ancient magic to try and keep the horror sealed away. He was silently, futilely trying to prevent Elias from breaking the seals, from unleashing this cosmic terror. His wide and distant eyes, his pleading gaze after Elias relights the lantern, they articulate his understanding and his desperate struggle far better than any words could.
But
Elias, in his single-minded pursuit and his deep-seated prejudice against Thomas, sees only obstruction. Another infuriating delay caused by the boy's strange behavior. It is profoundly, heartbreakingly tragic because Elias is so utterly blind, so dismissive of Thomas, that he entirely misinterprets a final, desperate, life-saving warning.
he thinks Thomas is just being weird.
Exactly. It forces us to confront how many vital warnings we might miss in our own lives because they don't come from the places or the people we expect, or because we're just too wrapped up in our own goals to truly see what's right in front of us. Thomas isn't just a boy here. He's a silent sentinel, burdened by this terrible awareness, making his struggle and Elias's ignorance all the more poignant.
That's truly heartbreaking to consider. And despite Thomas's silent, desperate efforts, Elias just pushes past him, doesn't he? Driven by his singular obsession, he finds the passage's destination, a large circular chamber. In the center stands a stone altar, stained dark with ancient residue.
Ugh, ancient residue.
Yeah. Runes covered every surface, pulsing faintly with that same sickly light. The air is thick with a palpable presence, a feeling of immense ancient power that was both intoxicating and terrifying. Elias, however, he feels his heart pound, his blood sing with dark energy. He believes, without a shred of doubt, that the something more he craved was within reach.
He's arrived.
He's finally there, at the heart of it all. It sounds both magnificent and horrifying at the same time. That deceptive lure is so strong.
The description of this unholy chamber is absolutely critical to understanding the true nature of the power Elias pursues. It's explicitly described as having an intoxicating and terrifying presence. That duality perfectly captures the deceptive nature of forbidden power. However, Elias, driven by his all-consuming ambition and already subtly influenced by its presence.
He only feels the intoxicating part.
Exactly. He only perceives the intoxicating aspect. He's already under its sway, unable to recognize the terror lurking beneath. The ancient residue on the altar and those faintly pulsing runes reinforce the idea that this place isn't just a chamber, it's a potent, living prison, a containment unit for something utterly malevolent.
It's not a source of power, it's a cage.
Precisely. Elias's pounding heart and singing blood aren't just excitement. They show he's already being affected, perhaps subtly corrupted, by the entity's influence, further blurring his judgment and strengthening his delusion. He mistakes this resonant, sinister corruption for a sign of destiny, a validation of his dark quest. He's not discovering power, he's walking straight into a trap set by an ancient, hungry entity.
And as Elias prepares to unleash this ancient horror, consulting the final passage of the text to identify the ritual which requires a focus, a conduit, and a sacrifice, the ultimate confrontation begins. A voice echoes from the entrance, desperate and urgent. "Stop, Elias!"
Hilarious.
It's Valerius, alone, his face etched with fear and grim determination. Elias, still clinging to his delusion, just sneers. "So my rival reveals his true colors. Come to claim the power for yourself."
Still thinks it's a rivalry, even now.
Even now. But Valerius, truly desperate, lunges forward, shouting the horrifying truth. "You fool, this isn't power to be claimed. It's an entity, a parasite that consumed Theron and has lain dormant, waiting for a fool like you to awaken it during a moment of transition." Then he screams this urgent plea, his voice cracking. "No, it's not a rivalry, Elias. I was trying to stop you. This chamber is a prison. The rituals are bindings. Thomas, help me." This is it, the absolute peak of the dramatic tension. Valerius finally reveals the horrifying truth. What's the emotional impact of this desperate confession, especially considering Elias's prior, completely skewed perception of him?
This scene is, without a doubt, the dramatic and emotional climax of the entire tragedy, and its impact is just utterly devastating. Valerius, who Elias had so fiercely believed to be this manipulative rival, is revealed in this desperate final moment to be an ally, someone who is genuinely trying to save him all along.
The complete opposite of what Elias thought.
The complete opposite. And the specific chilling words Valerius uses, parasite, consumed Theron, prism, they completely reframe everything Elias thought he knew about the power he was chasing. It's an incredibly potent moment of dramatic irony, as Elias's unchecked ambition and profound self-deception literally prevent him from seeing the truth of his dire situation, even when it's screamed directly at him by a voice of reason.
He still can't process it.
He can't. His reaction, that harsh, broken laughter, vividly illustrates that his mind is already fracturing under the crushing pressure of his own delusion. He's utterly unable to process this sudden, shattering truth. The realization that he's been so profoundly wrong about Valerius, about everything, adds another unbearable layer of self-inflicted torment, even if you can only grasp it in those fragmented seconds before his ultimate destruction. It's the ultimate, tragic unmasking of his fatal error.
And it's in this chaotic, desperate moment that the tragic payoff of Thomas's setup, all those hints about him, truly comes to its heartbreaking fruition. Elias falters, glancing at Thomas, who is no longer by the entrance. He stands closer to the altar, his small body rigid, his eyes glowing with the same phosphorescent light as the runes.
Oh, wow. Like the stones.
Exactly. The narrative explicitly clarifies that scraping sound Elias had heard earlier, Thomas hadn't been stumbling. He had been reinforcing the binding symbols, trying to subtly deter Elias, misunderstood in his silent efforts. Then Thomas lets out a guttural, inhuman cry, and the glowing runes on his skin flared, a desperate final attempt at containment. What an absolutely gut-wrenching moment.
This is the heartbreaking core of the story, isn't it? The emotional epicenter where all that earlier setup converges. Thomas, the misunderstood page, is revealed to have this innate, profound connection to the very magic Elias is trying to wield. A connection far deeper and more intuitive than Elias's scholarly, intellectual understanding could ever be.
He understood the binding.
He understood the bindings. He could physically feel the entity's malevolent presence, and he was fighting against it in silence all along. Using his subtle, seemingly clumsy methods to try and protect Elias, despite being constantly dismissed and underestimated, his guttural, inhuman cry and the runes flaring on his skin, they suggest he is far more than just a boy.
What do you think he is?
It's hard to say for sure. Perhaps a natural conduit for these ancient energies, a silent protector of the balance, or maybe even a previous victim of the same forces Theron tapped into, but with an inherent tragic resistance that prevented him from being fully consumed. His effort is described as futile, only because Elias's stubbornness, his blind ambition, had already set them on an irreversible path to destruction.
Too late.
It was too late. Elias sealed their fate before Thomas could truly be understood or his efforts could succeed. It's a profound moment of unheeded, selfless heroism. A cry for salvation that Elias was too deafened by his own desires to hear.
And despite Valerius's desperate pleas, despite Thomas's final silent struggle, Elias's stubbornness, his blind ambition, had already set the wheels in motion. The runes flare violently, the air grows impossibly cold, and a presence, vast and utterly alien, began to coalesce above the altar.
The entity emerges.
It emerges, and it was not the surge of controllable power Elias had envisioned, but a tearing, a rending of reality. Valerius screams, recoiling as shadows detach themselves from the walls, writhing and reaching. The entity lunged not for Valerius, but for the one who had awakened it, for
Elias.
Elias. He then feels an icy tendril pierce his mind, followed by another and another. His consciousness fragmented, his ambitious thoughts consumed and replaced by something vast, ancient, and utterly horrifyingly alien. This is the true horror, isn't it? Not gaining power, but annihilation. Existential consumption.
This is indeed the ultimate horrifying consequence. The direct result of Elias's unchecked ambition and his absolute inability to listen to reason or perceive the reality unfolding around him. The entity is explicitly called a parasite, remember? And Elias, in his desperate longing for something more, had ironically created the perfect void for it to fill within himself.
He invited it in.
He essentially did. The description of a tearing, a rending of reality, implies not just a magical explosion, but a true cosmic horror. A violation of fundamental existence that transcends any human comprehension or control. He didn't gain power, he became a mere vessel, a hollow shell. His very identity, his consciousness, his ambitious thoughts, everything that made him Elias, is utterly consumed and replaced by something vast, ancient, and incomprehensibly alien.
Gone.
Gone. It raises that important, chilling question for us to ponder. Is it ever better to remain ignorant of certain truths if the relentless pursuit of that knowledge leads to such profound and absolute devastation? The price Elias pays isn't just his life, it's his very self, his soul, his identity, utterly erased.
And the narrative leaves us with this truly haunting final image, one that will definitely linger long after the story ends. The last thing Elias sees is Valerius, his face a mask of horror and regret, and Thomas, his small body radiating a futile, desperate light. Then, the portrait's grin in his mind widened into a gaping cosmic maw. The conclusion is stark, chilling, undeniable. The power Elias had craved was his, but the price was everything. And the final, terrifying thought that just solidifies the tragedy. The castle, the kingdom, the world, they were now merely potential feeding grounds for the horror he had unleashed. All because he was too stubborn to see an ally, too blind to understand the silent warnings of a misunderstood page. That portrait's grin becoming a gaping cosmic maw is such a haunting, incredibly powerful image to end on. It truly captures the horror of his fate and the terrifying, far-reaching scope of his mistake.
It's a masterful piece of imagery, isn't it? The portrait of King Theron, initially that symbol of cruel ambition and Elias's dark fascination, becomes the ultimate terrifying symbol of Elias's doom. It reflects the parasitic entity's true cosmic nature, mocking his hubris and consuming his very being. The final lines of the narrative encapsulate the entire tragedy with such chilling precision. A man utterly destroyed by his own choices, unleashing an unspeakable world-altering horror, all because he could not transcend his own ego and perceive the wisdom and warnings directly in front of him.
It all comes back to his blindness.
It profoundly underscores the devastating cost of misperception, of unchecked, self-serving ambition, and of dismissing the quiet, unassuming truths offered by those we deem simple or lesser. The horror, as you said, isn't just external. It's born directly from his internal flaws. A void of self-awareness that was just waiting to be filled by something truly monstrous.
Wow. Okay, that was a truly gripping and, deeply unsettling deep dive into the portrait's grin. To sort of recap where we've journeyed through the harrowing narrative of Lord Elias Thorne, witnessing the devastating consequences of ambition when it's allowed to just run rampant and completely blind us. His relentless craving for power, fueled by pure ego and this complete inability to see beyond his own desires, it sealed his tragic fate. He dismissed crucial warnings from the most unexpected sources, those subtle, unsettling signs from the castle itself.
The environment screaming at him.
Exactly. The direct, desperate plea of Valerius, whom he wrongly perceived as a rival right up until the end, and most heartbreakingly, the profound, selfless efforts of young Thomas, whom he tragically dismissed as just simple.
And this narrative resonates so powerfully because it illuminates these fundamental human flaws that really transcend the fictional setting, don't they? It's a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the insidious pitfalls of intellectual arrogance, and the critical importance of open-mindedness.
It's not just about magic.
Not at all. It's not just about deciphering ancient texts, it's about critical thinking in a much broader sense. It's about our perceptions of others, our willingness to question our own assumptions, and how we interpret the world around us. The story is a masterclass in tragic irony, where every single one of Elias's choices, driven by his flaws, just pushes him closer and closer to his inevitable, horrific end. It's a chilling reminder that the greatest threats often come not from external enemies, but from within ourselves.
So, why does this matter to you listening right now? How often do we, maybe in smaller ways in our own lives, fall into similar traps? Misinterpreting warnings, dismissing those we perceive as lesser or maybe less knowledgeable, or relentlessly chasing more, whether it's career advancement, wealth, influence, at any cost, without truly pausing to consider the hidden price.
Yeah, the unseen costs.
Elias's story is a chilling reminder of how our own biases, our own perpetual self-absorption, as the text calls it, can blind us to vital truths and lead us down a destructive path. It really forces us to pause and reflect on the voices we choose to ignore and the potential consequences of that selective hearing.
It truly does. And perhaps as a final provocative thought to carry with you from this deep dive, consider the silent helpers in your own life. Those people who might be offering a different perspective, a quiet warning, or even just a subtle piece of insight that doesn't quite fit your current narrative or your ambitions. Are there messages you might be too preoccupied, too driven, or maybe too perpetually self-absorbed to hear? What profound wisdom or perhaps crucial warnings might you be missing because of your own biases and assumptions about the source?
Exactly. What hidden strengths and insights might reside in those often overlooked people, and what profound wisdom can sometimes come from the most unexpected places. It's definitely a question worth pondering long after this deep dive ends. A call, maybe, to cultivate a more open, less self-absorbed way of seeing the world and the people in it.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the Portrait's Grin.